All right, sorry, recording is in progress. Welcome to Build Your Own Marketing API with Python. Today we're going to look at errors and bugs and debugging. It'll be a short session. And yeah, let's just jump straight in. If you have any questions, if you have anything you'd like to say, do feel free to put it in the chat box. That is totally fine. I will try and keep an eye on it as well. Okay, so just to give you a quick note of what we're doing today. So I will give a general overview on errors and bugs and a little bit of debugging. I will talk about the biggest and the baddest bugs and errors I've encountered in my own Flask app so far. And towards the end, there will be a little Q&A. This bit will not be recorded, but I would maybe like to have a chat about what you have had, maybe your craziest bugs. What did you do to solve it? That sort of kind of thing. And yeah, just to briefly introduce myself. So my name is Laura. I'm based in Seoul in Korea. I'm not really a tech person per se. I would consider myself tech adjacent. I work in marketing for a webtoon company as my day job, and I enjoy coding as a hobby. And what I've been wanting to do is I've been wanting to try and reverse engineer a marketing API, which is what I work with on the daily, and then in the process maybe help others build their own marketing API as well. And yeah, as you might be able to imagine, Korean food is amazing. So that is an actual representation of what I do every day. So now to get cracking and working on the presentation for this chat, it really brought back some memories. So back when I was in primary school, one of my teachers told us that the first computer bug was an actual bug, an actual moth that was caught. And I just remember it just completely blew my mind. And I looked it up. So apparently in 1947, there was a computer at Harvard University called Mark II. And the staff kept having issues. Some program just would not run. And when they went to investigate, they found that it was not anything to do with how the program was written. It was an actual bug. And they preserved that bug. And yeah, that's apparently how the name came about. Still love that story. Now, just for general debugging tips. So yeah, generally, the more complex your code, the cooler your project, the higher the probability for something to go wrong. And generally, if you just look at the error, it might already tell you. So for example, this is from my own app. I decided to have a little spelling error. And then what it did was it actually gave me not a syntax error, it gave me an attribute error. And it told me there is no attribute called run. Did you mean run? So a lot of the time, some kind of debugging tool will already tell you what's going on. Sometimes it'll even have a little suggestion for you on what to do. You should still probably be wary of silent bugs. So bugs where you run your program, but it does not throw up any errors, right? But your program will still do the wrong thing. So you do need to test it. And maybe some other options. There is something called rubber ducking, which is where you have a little rubber duck beside your computer and you explain the problem to the duck as if the duck was a person. And then by verbalizing the problem, oftentimes you can already find what the issue is, right? So I guess that's why we have therapists. Sometimes that's why we have friends, right? We need to verbalize what's going on in order to find out what we can do about it. Then other options that you can have is, again, Google or maybe Stack Overflow, where you can ask, you can also answer. So that's really helpful. What I've sometimes done in the past is I've been on GitHub, where I've looked at other people's projects, how they've done it to help me progress in my own bits. From what I've been hearing for ChatGPT, right? So some people use ChatGPT for debugging. I'm going to have to say, personally, my experience has not been the best. because every time I've tried ChatGPT, it's introduced more errors, more bugs, and I'm not entirely sure why that is. But what I've found is that ChatGPT cannot really count. It doesn't really count things properly, and I feel like that introduces more errors. But I would love to hear from you. Maybe have you maybe used ChatGPT? Have you maybe used another tool to debug? And then another last or more general thing that you can do is, so there is a theory in psychology, in neuropsychology, where the brain has a diffuse mode, and there's also a concentrated mode. So if you're concentrating on something, you are focusing your attention on a problem, and your thought tends to go in a certain way. It's a very structured way. There is also something called a diffuse mode for your thinking, where your brain is sort of running in the background, and as you are maybe not thinking about the problem directly, you are able to form loose associations, and you are able to have different thoughts than you would have otherwise. If you're interested, there is a person called Dr. Barbara Oakley. She has done a lot of research on focused mode versus diffuse mode, and she recommends stepping away from your problem and then engaging in certain nonverbal activities, such as taking a nap, such as meditation, cleaning, maybe some kind of dance, some exercise, taking a walk outside, that kind of thing, to reset your brain. And then you come back to whatever your problem is. Maybe even you have to sleep on it overnight, and then you might be able to see what's wrong with your code. And lastly, if you want to go a little bit more technical, so we have a lot of debugger tools already. So for example, I was working on a little Flask app, and Flask actually already has a debugger built in. And again, that was from my own code, where it has a built-in debugger, and you can, yeah, it does help you. It will help you, and it'll say, okay, actually, this and this bit is wrong. Please have a look when you look at your code editor. Another thing that you can do is you can add in a breakpoint. So I'm using VS Code, and if you have a look at sort of the left-hand side, you can activate a little bit. It looks like a little red dot, and then you can add in a breakpoint, and your program will continue running up until that breakpoint, and then it'll stop, and you can actually look inside the program and see what's happening. And what you can do is you can have a breakpoint for an expression. So for example, the breakpoint will it'll occur when the expression evaluates to true. You can have a count, you can have a log message. And then another thing that you could do to debug is you can use print statements throughout your code, or you can use a logger, and you can have different log levels. I think there is things like debug, critical, warning messages, and they can also help you debug your program. And just to talk about myself for a second. So when I was working on my Flask app, I can show you that in the wild as well on the code editor. I kept getting this error where I had activated my virtual environment, and it kept saying that Flask was not installed, but which was weird because I was in my virtual Flask environment. And I eventually went through a lot of Stack Exchange nodes until I came across a solution to set an app context, and that solved that issue for me. And another bug that I had that took me a moment to find out was I had my Flask for a while. Everything was going okay. And I was running it, and then at some point it suddenly gave me an error saying that the port was not available because the port was being used which didn't really make sense to me. And again, I did some Googling, some Stack Exchange, and then I found that if I manually specified the port, then I was able to run my program. But before, it would just break if I didn't specify it. Yeah. So at this point, I would just like to cite my sources briefly. Since there's not really an academic presentation, I've kept it brief and non-academic in my citations. So there were some Codecademy learning materials that I've used. I love Dr. Barbara Oakley. There are books such as Learning How to Learn and A Mind for Numbers, which detail a lot on focus mode versus diffuse mode, which is really, really interesting. There is an article by National Geographic, which is where I got that image and that info from in the beginning, which detailed more information about world's first computer bug. And then lastly, I consulted a Wikipedia page about rubber ducking. Now, at this point, I would like to stop recording and I would like to have a little chat. Is there maybe something that you would like to share? Is there maybe a question that you might have? Okay. And let me just stop the recording in 3, 2,